Hello, everyone. So glad that you could join us today. Hope you had a good week. And I just want to invite you to come just sit around your table, grab your coffee, and we're just going to sit and relax. I've got a guest with me today, and her name's Ashley Lutz. And so glad to have you join me today, Ashley. Thank you.
I'm excited. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'm very excited to be here and be able to share. I support a lot of my husband. He's the one that goes out and does a lot of evangelism, and he's in a lot of, schools telling his testimony and stuff like that. So this is kind of funny that I get to, actually the past 2 weeks, I've been interviewed a lot. So this is nice. I'm
Oh, that's
excited.
good. That's good. No, your husband is an evangelist?
Yes, so his name is Levi Lutz, and he in Texas we started out, it's called Harvest Now Ministries, and we planted a home called Harvest House. So we help men that struggle with addictions, that are, homeless, suicidal, mental health problems and stuff like that. And it's a free program, and it's similar to Teen Challenge. So I
Oh,
don't
good.
know. Yeah.
Yep.
And so we have that there, and that's where it all started. And then we've just, over time, just we knew we were supposed to come to Florida, but we're waiting for the right connections, and at the right time, in God's timing, the right door opened. And we both work for Together in the Harvest. He's the evangelist for that, and that is from Brownsville Revival. If y'all are familiar with Steve Hill, I work for his wife Jerry Hill, and she is I'm her admin and her assistant, and I absolutely love it. It's a dream come true to be a part of her life and that ministry. So it's exciting what God is doing, and I know there's more to come. And Levi also is the director of the boot camp for Christ for All Nations, alongside with Daniel Kalinda. And so it's an honor to be a part of that as well, supporting him through that, and get to raise up hundreds of evangelists that go out into the nations, and they lead their country to, they spread the gospel that way. So I think it's really awesome to be a part of all of that. It all comes full circle. So I like to
Wow.
support him in all he does. So that's exciting. Now, I mean, even when I first started coming to the Lord, I actually was introduced to Brownsville on YouTube. So I was like, I love Steve Hill and I love Jerry Hill, and I would love to be able to work with them. And, they helped me a lot through this discipleship, walking, growing up in the Lord. Like, I had no idea. So their stories are what really helped me, when you're on the front lines of ministry. And that's exactly what me and Levi are. We're on the front lines of it. And it's, you have the highs, you have the lows, you have the enemy comes in like a flood, and you've got to fight those battles. And that's where to me, I'm like, everything always happens. So it's like, we're in that type of ministry. It's probably a lot of people are like, y'all are crazy, but you'll get the phone call in the middle of the night, people, suicidal or a drug addict, they need help, getting off medications, or, you just get that. It's that type of life. And
Yeah.
you're constantly going, and you're constantly wanting to help. So, it is definitely something that is hard sometimes, but the end result is you see people's lives changed and touched by the power of God. And that is ultimately what we're after, is we're wanting people to be touched by God the way we were, because we know that we were so lost. And when the power of God and the love of God came over us, and, personally myself, it changed my whole life. Like, it was an instant encounter with Jesus.
So take us back to the beginning then, Ashley.
Yes. Okay. So I am so excited. I have my little notes here too, just in case I get off track, because sometimes that happens. Hopefully. So
All
I'll
good.
try. There's so many details to it that every time I watch these, I'm like, man, I should have said this, but I'm going to let the Holy Spirit flow,
Yeah.
and whatever he pulls out or whatever, and if you have any questions or anything, just,
Yeah.
say.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I am super excited about sharing this. So I was a lost teenager, and I had a great, family. They loved me. Not really a Christian background or anything like that. I mean, they were broken as well. And so they did the best they could, So I was, just running for myself. And at 15, I wound up getting pregnant. And in this pregnancy, I went to my dad and I was like, Dad, I didn't want to tell him I was pregnant. I didn't want to let him down, but I had to. And he was like, well, why don't you go have an abortion? And I'm like, just something inside of me was like, I could not, like, I just couldn't do it. So his choice for me was either I go get married to this guy because he was 18, or or he gets thrown in jail because he was 18 and I was 15. And so I made the choice.
So that was the choice you were offered.
Yeah, that was the choice I was left with. So of course I decided to marry him because I don't want to see him in jail because I love this guy. He was my everything. And so I made that decision and I got married, and the marriage only lasts like 2 years because I was obviously, I was young. And so
Did you stay in school?
Actually didn't. That's another part too. I didn't. I actually was going to do homeschool and I didn't do it. But actually about 5 years ago, I think I got my GED, and that was very hard for me to do, but I did it and I overcome, and I went to Bible school. So I'm proud of myself for that. So anybody that, they you keep on doing it and you keep on, it took me about 3 times to pass the math, but I finally did. That's a testimony. But I didn't, and I wind up just spiraling downhill from there. And I remember I started going to a church in Alvin, Texas, and I knew like God was pulling and tugging at my heart, but still didn't understand everything. And it was a particular night where this evangelist came in, and it was actually Teen Challenge too. Like they came in and they did like testimonies and stuff like that. Well, he came in and he pulled me to the side and he was like, hey, there's a women's center. You can go there. And if you have someone to watch your son for about 8 weeks, it'll change your whole life and all this stuff. And I was like, well, I'm not doing that. And then he was like, and then at the end of it, he was like, God is telling me right now that you're going to have 2 boys, and there's a man of God that's going to come in your life, and he's going to help take care of them and raise them. And I'm going, no way. Like, you're a false prophet. You are, you don't even know me, and you're a liar, because I only had 1 boy at the time. So that was the point where it just went really downhill for me. And I just kind of like hardened my heart to it. And I just kind of got really bad into the party scene. Like I was going to clubs and I was finding every fulfillment there, and drinking and just staying up all night, just acting however I wanted. And it just kept on, getting worse and worse. And I wound up moving to Austin, Texas, where my family moved to, and it got worse there. And I met this guy there, and he was a firefighter. So I was like, oh, he can just rescue my life and all of this stuff. And, it was like that song, Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places, because I was at a bar, and there he was. So it didn't take long. I wound up marrying him. But when I married him, it was like, I did not know this person 100%. And stuff came out later on that he was doing. And I was like, I cannot be in this relationship. So I actually left, and I knew it was all wrong. I just really up and left. Like nobody knew what I was doing. And I went to another town, and I wound up getting with my drug dealer. And I thought my life was so good and I was so happy, but I really wasn't. I was miserable. And I wound up getting pregnant not too long after that. And then even through that pregnancy, I was like, I kept feeling something was wrong with the baby, like the heart. But when I would go to the appointments, they would be like, the baby has the 4 chambers. He's healthy. Everything's going good. But deep down inside, it was like, I knew something was wrong. And now that I look back on things, I'm like, I wonder if that was God showing me like, hey, there's going to be something wrong. And, all my life growing up, like I had this, it's like God was always with me, and he was always trying to show me something better, but I just didn't understand all of it. So I just kept running from it. But I had conviction about life. And which now looking back, I'm like, his hand was on me the entire time. And sometimes I wish if I would have yielded to that, what would have happened? But this is why what happened. He knew it was going to take something special to break it, to break everything. All the reminders throughout the whole time, he would always be trying to woo me in. And I just was ignoring it. I was like, I'm right with God. It's okay. I mean, I remember waitressing one time and people came in and told me about Jesus. And I'm like, yes, I'm right with him. And they would leave me little tracts. And I just look back now and I'm like, oh, he was right there. Like, what if I just would have surrendered? But of course, he was preparing me for what was about to happen. So, of course, you're born with a sick child. You're not right with God. You're questioning God at this point. But the only thing I could think of was Proverbs 3. And it was the only scripture I ever had memorized was trust in the Lord with all your heart. And I just wrote it on everything. I wrote it on just everything. It was just like my thing. And even the drug dealer guy was like, he's like, you are liking it's like you're taking up for the Lord after the Lord did this to your child. And I'm like, the Lord did not do this to my child. Like, he did not. And I remember that being very heavy on me because this guy was like evil. He was like he was straight evil, sent from the enemy to destroy my life. And so I knew in my heart that I had to get out of the situation, but my son was sick. And when you're born with a sick child, you really don't know what to do, especially whenever you don't know who to turn to. You don't have anybody positive in your life. You're just hopeless. So during that time, I was at hospitals and having to really, every time I think about this moment, it makes me just want to just cry. But when you have to trust someone to heal your child, and when he goes through the operating rooms and you can't do nothing about it, it's the most devastating, heartbreaking thing that a parent should ever walk through. And I remember just so many times I'd be woke up in the middle of the night and they were saying he's not going to make it. He's got all these problems. And the only thing I knew to do was like, Jesus, please heal my son. And through all of that, I wound up getting on depression medicine because I wasn't sure if he was going to make it. And I didn't know if I could cope with living a life without him. And then at that time, I believe he was probably 7 years old when this was all happening. So when Shane was born and he was born sick, it was traumatic because I had to leave him even with family members because he couldn't be at the hospital with me while I was going through all of this. Mm-hmm. So it was months at a time. My whole life was just shooken up. And so after all of that, and then there was so many surgeries that failed. He was 2 weeks old when they did the first surgery, and I knew he was not going to make it. Like I remember going into the hospital room and they're like, you can't pick him up, but he looked dead to me. My child looked dead to me. And I just picked him up in my arms. And I know at that moment that was the Lord, because the Lord breathed life back into him. Immediately doctors came running in and were like, we have to take him to open heart surgery right now. So he has a cardiac defect called tetralogy of Fallot, which means you have the 4 chambers of your heart, but your valve is not, whenever the child's born, takes the first breath of life, it's not opening and closing correctly. So it just wasn't working. So the normal procedure for surgery for that was putting a shunt in, and it did not work. So they had to go in and do it. So at 2 weeks old, I'm like, this 10-hour surgery. And I'm like, and the doctor's like, I don't know if he's going to make it through it. So, but he made it through it, and we all made it through it. And he became, very, he was healthy through it all and everything, but he had some major, he had colic. I thought it was colic. And so when we get him home from the hospital, he was like 3 months old, but he was like a newborn baby because he was so behind. He would cry constantly, and I would be like, what is wrong with him? And so they all thought it was colic, but it turned out like at 6 months old, his head started like really swelling, and I rushed him into the emergency room, and he wound up having hydrocephalus as well. How I do not know he survived that long, and doctors never caught it. I don't know. It's like a miracle from God. So then we were rushing home. Hydrocephalus, it's called water on the brain. Okay. So yeah, so they went in emergency and gave him a VP shunt. So now he had a shunt going from the cranium into his into his stomach. So I'm like, oh my gosh. So after all of that, it just seemed like, the crying stopped as much. And then he was like not doing anything. Like he wouldn't crawl. He wouldn't do hardly anything. It was just, he was so delayed. And like, so the doctors were telling me, well, at 1, he may not make it. So I knew that if he made it to his first birthday, I was like, I wanted to have a special celebration for him because his first year was coming up, but I had to get away from this guy. He was like really bad for me and bad for my son. Like I wanted something better for my children. And I knew that he was not the answer, but I couldn't make it because I was addicted to pills and he was the one providing them for me. And another piece he wouldn't get away when I was asking him to get away from me. So I was stuck. And so I remember just, I was like hallucinating, and I was realizing, I was like, you know what, I have a big problem. I had a doctor's appointment. It was Christmas Eve, and I went to the doctor's appointment. And as I was opening the door was locked. And I was like, what is going on? I need my medication. I haven't had it in my system in 24 hours. I was already starting to feel like hurting and throwing up and weak. And I knew in my heart that I was addicted and I needed help. So I get in my car and I drive down this dirt road and I get out of it and I'm hysterical. And I'm like, God, if you're really real, I need help. I need help. I need you to help me. And I think at that moment that was the pivoting point in my life where God heard my cry, but there wasn't like electric shock, like lightning from the sky or anything like that. But from that cry, he led my life. And I got a waitressing job outside in this small town. And I was called in one night and they're like, hey, can you come in and work this shift? And that night I made like $180. And I was like, yes, this is exactly where God wants me, because I can make enough money now to take care of my kids and I can get away from this guy. And so they came to me, that evening and they were like, would you mind working the morning shift? And I'm like, oh, that's going to be a little difficult, but it wound up working out really good for my schedule. So I started working the morning shift, and it was probably 2 days into it. And you know how like small towns, how they have those, I don't know if they do it where you are, but in Texas, they have like, it's like these little canister things. And it'll say like, if your child's born sick, or they'll have like fundraisers and stuff like that. So it's like donate money here.
Yeah.
So that was all over this town because it was small and everybody knew each other. They all knew me. They knew what was going on. And so, so this pastor was there and he was, he was telling me, we're praying for you. And I'm just like, yeah. I'm like, okay. And then, so I go to the next table and I pour this man's coffee and he said, he's like, the Lord just spoke to me and he's going to heal your son. And I was like, well, who are you? I was like, everybody knows each other in this town. You just come out of nowhere and you're telling me that God has a plan and that he is going to heal my son. So I'm going, I don't even know you. You're weird, So every day he just kept coming back and kept coming back. And he was, I would fill his coffee and he would tell me about Jesus every day, that Jesus loved me and all this stuff. And so what that did was kind of like start opening my eyes. Like, does Jesus really love me? Like, what is he doing? And then, I would tell my mom, I'd call her and I'd be like, Mom, I think, this homeless guy came in the restaurant today and he told me about Jesus. And he said that God had a plan for my life. And so I was like, maybe he's an angel. Maybe he's the devil. I don't know. I was like, maybe he doesn't have a mom, because I didn't know who he was. He was just this rough guy that came in and said that Jesus had a plan for my life. So after all of that, I remember he just kept coming back every single day. And one day he was very serious with me and he was like, look, he's like, he basically read my mail. So it was at that moment, a John 4 moment with whenever, Jesus goes to the Samaritan woman and he's like, calls out everything in her life. That's where I was at. And he was like, you're with a drug dealer, you're doing this, you're taking all these pills and you need help and you're running from God and you're not right with him at all. And I'm going, oh my gosh, who is this guy? I didn't recognize it, that this was the Lord at all. But I think whenever this was happening, the light was being shined in my life. Yeah. Because the Bible says that everything in the darkness will come to the light. And I think that's what was happening, was this guy was exposing me and the Lord was knocking on my door and he's like, you got to let me in. And so at that moment, I was just like, you know what? I knew everything I started questioning. I'm like, God is real. And then there was this other side of me that was like, God is not real. So it was like the angel on one side, the devil on the other. And then one night in particular, I remember this man handed me a card, and on his card, he said, you know, you need to call me. He's like, I help people like you. And if you need a place to go, or if you need help or anything, you need to call me. I'll help you. And so I didn't know at the time, but I was like, whatever. So I put the card in my purse, and it did say that he was an evangelist. And I'm like, who is this guy? So at this time, I looked him up on MySpace. I don't even know if anybody remembers MySpace, but it was like the social media platform at the time. And I looked him up, and I'm like, I felt terrible because I was like, he's a minister and he has this ministry. And I'm like telling him he's not real. Like, who are you? You know? So I felt really bad. And it was like that evening, I think I went and bought pills or something. And when I did that, I felt horrible. Like, I felt like I was going to die. I felt like death was after me, and I felt bad about everything I was doing in my life. And so I felt so bad that I was so scared that I called him, and I was like, look, I need help. I was like, I feel like I'm about to die. Something's wrong. Something's really wrong with me. And he did not say really any much. He said, you need to repent right now. He's like, you need to repent, and you need to ask Jesus to forgive you for everything you've done. He's like, you've got to start following him. Something bad's going to happen to you. And so that's all it took for me. And I want y'all to kind of paint the picture that I was at that time, single mom, kicking out a drug dealer, 2 small kids, and living in the projects. I ran to my bathroom, and that's all it took for me. I got on my knees, and I got on my knees on this brown carpet, and I remember asking God to forgive me. And when I did that, the love of God came into the bathroom, and I never felt that before in my life. I never felt how special or how the love that I felt was enough to unlock me, that it was powerful, and everything that sadness, everything that happened in my life, it just, at that moment, love is all I needed, and it all went away. And it was like so powerful that I was like, something just happened in my life, it was like electric shock. Like, I never felt that before. And I got up from the floor that day, and I have never been the same since that day. I've been serving Jesus for 13 years after that. And it's like, I've never, ever been the same. I got up, I cried. I knew Jesus loved me more than anything. I remember him exposing all the darkness at that moment, that it was bad for me, and I needed to get out of the situation that I was in. And my life was changed at that moment because of repentance and really saying, I'm sorry. Like, it wasn't just like I'm so sorry. It was like, I am sorry I did this to you, Jesus. And recognizing that is when I really felt like everybody at that moment in the time that I came in contact with, they had to know about Jesus, because that's all it took for me. It was like the woman with the hem of his garment. He just walked by her. That's what he did with me. And I was made whole. And I could not deny that he was not real. He was so real to me. And, at that time, I was just like blown away by what he did. And then I knew I needed to get off pills, and I knew I needed some help. And, it's crazy to even, when I look back on it, how much he was guiding me the whole time, taking me to the restaurant, getting me a job, meeting that guy, and being exposed like that. But also, just knowing how loved I was. I mean, I didn't pick up a Bible, and that day I picked up a Bible and I couldn't put it down. Like, I was so intrigued by Jesus. Like, I wanted to know, who was this Jesus? Because I've never met him. Like, I've never seen it like this powerful, not even in church. And I don't mean to say like church is not powerful, because it is. Jesus is there as well. But this was like made me to who I am today. And so after all of that, I mean, this guy just like, the evangelist that led me to Jesus, he was there for me through the warfare I was facing, because I was facing the demonic in a way I never faced before. So now I'm coming off of pills, and the devil's after me, And I don't know anything about this kind of stuff. I'm seeing things. I'm like, I'm seeing demons, and I'm like, I had to call upon this man to help me because I don't know who to call. So, he tells me a lot of stuff that, I'm going to be experiencing. It's like he was sent to me to help me. It was very weird. And someone I didn't even know. And, one day in particular, I was getting my kids ready for school. I was home by myself, and I get a knock on the door, and it was him. It was that evangelist. He says, I know this is crazy. He's like, but God told me where you lived, and he said you need help. And I'm going, oh my gosh, like I'm blown away at this moment, because I knew that I had temptations to go take more medicine, but I knew I needed to come off of it. But that man literally sat with me and prayed with me in a way that I didn't understand, but he was like praying in the spirit. He was going after my soul in the spirit and praying protection over me and really fighting for me, because I didn't know anything about it. And nobody in my area knew anything about this. Like my family could not have helped me. They thought I was crazy, actually. So, through all of that, I mean, he came, and he just in that time like really helped me get my life together. And at that time, I didn't know this, but God was orchestrating that relationship, because that relationship winds up being my husband. And that's what blew me away, is because like it wasn't like an instant love connection. He will tell you to this day, he's like, it was a straight God connection that I wanted to obey the Lord. And I knew that he was saying, Ashley, she's mine, and I need you to help her. And that's all it was, because I wasn't ready to fall in love with anybody. I was definitely did not need to be in love with anyone. And I needed to find Jesus. And I remember in my mind, whenever we wind up, he was telling me how much, he's like, Ashley, I do love you. And I'm like, no, you love everybody. You're an evangelist, and you're this famous evangelist in East Texas. And everybody knows you. And he's like, no, he's like, I do love you. And I've never loved anybody the way that I love you. And I was like, I didn't think at that moment that I was ready to love anyone, but it was like that evening, I heard this in my head. I heard revival, and an instant thing happened that I loved Levi. Like it just a light bulb went off. Like I loved him, and that was who I was supposed to be with for the rest of my life. And from there on, like when all this was happening, my son, he gets healed. So Shane is he's going to be celebrating 14. He's going to be 14 in March. And, we do go through a battle with him with his health and stuff, but he's like in 2 weeks, we're going to be back in Texas, and he's going to have heart surgery again. He just had heart surgery last December. So they're going to go back in. And it's just like these type of things, these challenges he's going to go through, and he's going to face these giants. But this child, like you will see Shane, and he's like completely, grace of God is on him. He's not scared of anything. And when he goes into surgery, he doesn't even act afraid. And I don't know if God did that to him for me to not be afraid, but because he acts so strong, and he just has had, me from the very, very beginning of knowing like who he is, and teaching me about him, and setting me up for success in life that I always dreamed of having, a good life, and, following God and helping people. Like always wanted to do that, but I never knew that I would have to go the lowest to get to the highest place in him. And that's where he did. And you earlier said that, maybe this all happened, for a reason, but it did, because I wouldn't have compassion the way I do for single moms. I have so much compassion. I'm like, this is only God, because I know, I was a person full of hate and bitterness and anger, that when I got set free, it all went away. And, I just never dreamed of any of this happening. And it's a beautiful story. I mean, there's so much to it. With my son, the first one that I had when I was 15, his name is Chris. He's 21. He's a man of God. He serves alongside our family, helps us whatever we need, helps his, dad take care of whatever we need. He just is there. So it's like, even that, if I would have made the decision of having an abortion, his soul, and I'm not condemning anybody that has gone through that. What I'm saying is we don't know what their lives are supposed to become of. And that's not to hurt anyone. That is, I'm not even trying to say anything hurtful at all. I'm saying, I could have made the decision, but in my heart, I just knew, that I just couldn't, but he's just precious, and God has orchestrated our whole family, and we've adopted, and have another 21-year-old daughter. We adopted her, and she's same thing. We all work together as a family, and it's beautiful how it just all comes together, so we can do the bigger picture of what God has called us to do, because it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of the highs and the lows of ministry. So, but I mean, there's so much more to it, but the beautiful thing of it is the hem of his garment, how Jesus walks by the lady and she gets healed. And I think that's where a lot of us women are, is that we're walking by, but he's just ready to touch us and it's going to be okay. And I think that's where the biggest message comes in for me, is because I can relate to all of those different, areas, and know that how much this world needs Jesus, and needs, the people to say how much, he's changed our lives. And he's real. And that was actually something too, like a father's love. I knew my dad loved me and all that, but being with the Father and his love and restoration, he's helped me really be restored in that area. And that saying where hurting people hurt people. And it's so true. If you grow up in a home and, your parents aren't trying to hurt you, but they're hurting deep down. So, and they don't want to tell you those things. So they make choices and decisions that can hurt you growing up. Not that they're wanting to do that, or, even me, I mean, even being a Christian mom, sometimes I say things I don't mean, or, and because you're just in that moment. But, I think that's where it was at for me growing up. And that's why restoration in that area for a daughter and a father is very, very significant and very special and very necessary in this world right now. I look back on it, I don't even think, I'm like, okay, God, you sent me Levi, wow. I seriously think sometimes I'm like, I see him on stage and I see him, leading all these people to Jesus and teaching them how to evangelize, teaching them how to be a soul winner. And I'm like, wow, God, what you did with two people that were drug addicts that were so lost, that just said yes to Jesus and yielding. And I think that's the beauty of it, is that we were so broken, and we know what it takes to be put back together. So, and he knows what will get that person, and he knows what they need, and I mean, I'm like, sometimes I'll pray for people. I'm like, you need to just do something, God, but it's part of their, how he's going to reach them, because he knows what's going to set them free. But for me, it was the love of God, and still is the love of God. That feeling of the presence of the Lord never left my side. It never has. And even if I have a bad day, I mean, even, my husband travels all over the world, and there's times where 3 weeks at a time, I don't see him, or a month at a time, but it's his presence. Jesus is here with me. I don't know how to really explain it. If I get afraid, I know I'm not always I do struggle with anxiety and fear sometimes, and I don't want to, but there are times, I'm like, oh, I'm here by myself. And, but the instant calling upon Jesus, everything shifts. And when you call upon his name, it shifts. The atmosphere shifts. Everything shifts. So that's the beauty of it. So.
Well, that's amazing. He restores our faith. He restores our health. So glad to hear that your son is better. I mean, he's still doing surgeries, but he's still here.
Yes. And we've had God's hand's been on him. And, I was thinking the other day, I was like, I think he's had 8 surgeries. So, this one will make his eighth, I think. But through this, I mean, you never want your child to go. You don't want him to leave, and you don't want to see your child sick, and you don't want to see them hurting. So I think that's the hardest part for a parent, is you have to be so strong for them. But it's amazing what God has even done in Shane's life. And he's able to, you can just see it on him, like, the miracle that God did for him. And, he's going to have challenges, and he's going to have multiple surgeries. But we know that Jesus gave us Shane, and we know he knows exactly what his heart needs. And there's a lot of complications with his heart. Like it's like stuff I don't even understand sometimes, but I'm like, but Jesus is the one that made him. So he knows what he needs. And I'm very thankful for all of the things that he has done and continues to do daily, in our lives, and uses our lives to so people can see him. And that's the beauty of it. I was watching, on a part of the group, and I love it that you have all these women and, your platform. And, a lot of us as women, we don't think sometimes that, our thoughts, or, we could be in a lonely moment at the moment. You could be in your closet crying. I know I have done this many times, or, even being in full-time ministry and, crying, or you feel let down. I know many people have let me down, especially over the last few months. And God sees us at that moment, and he knows exactly what we need. And I think even if you're a single mom, that God sees everything you're going through, your struggle, and that he is going to make a way. And even in the most weakest moments of our life, and that we feel like nobody cares, that he is there and he's ready to meet us. And all we have to do is call upon him. And like I said, I'm big into the atmospheres in the house, and keeping, worship music playing, the positivity, and sometimes I'm not as positive because I can be negative too, but just know that as soon as you do these things and you make, you start praying out loud, or, things start shifting and changing, and then you're going to start feeling the strength come upon you that, I can do this. I can keep walking, forward. And there's going to be letdowns. There's going to be people that are going to hurt you. There's going to be, family that's going to let you down, but you just got to keep going forward and doing the right thing and following him until, he comes back or takes us home, So those are the things I would just encourage you to keep on praying, keep on standing on promises of God, and keep claiming life over situations.
He created us for community, and we're not supposed to be alone and isolated. And that's what the enemy will do. If we're feeling afraid, or if we're feeling uncertain, then we'll stay home, or we'll isolate, or we'll disconnect somehow. And we're built for community. We stand stronger together. So that's, I think, one of the things in this group. It's people have been connecting. So I
had this mug made on it. It says, the world needs you to be who God created you to be. So it's like, those things, like when we do need each other, because that person needs your gifting, your calling, your purpose. And we all work together in this. And when that happens, you see revival, you see, things shifting in your home and in your life. And it's so important.
It is.
Community is.
Yeah, it is. And we can be strong together for each other.
Yes.
So, yeah. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Ashley. It's been wonderful to get to know you a bit, and look forward to hearing more stories. Really glad you're in the group, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye for now, and we'll see you. Everyone else, we'll see you next week.
Yes, thank you. You have a good day.
Thanks.